Welcome to the Self-Care for the Creative podcast, where we talk about self-care strategies for creatives, empaths, and highly sensitive people. I'm your host, Stefani Fryzel, aka Dylan. I'm an artist, a songwriter, and an author. And today I have a very special guest, and we talk all things self-care along the creative journey. I'm so glad you're here. 'Cause I know I'm right. Frequency is a Los Angeles-based music producer and songwriter, best known for producing and co-writing the Billboard #1 and Grammy Award-winning record, The Monster, for Eminem and Rihanna. His songs have generated over 5 billion worldwide streams, racking up 19 times platinum and 5 gold certifications. He has co-written and produced songs for artists such as Bebe Rexha, Tate McRae, Melanie Martinez, G-Eazy, Black Bear, Machine Gun Kelly, Snoop Dogg, Leah Kate, Kiara, and so many more. He is also my lovely husband. Please welcome Frequency.
Crowd goes wild.
Was that cute? I thought that was cute. That was a cute intro. So I'm going to make you introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, and what your daily life looks like.
My name is Frequency, also known as Brian, and I am a music producer and a songwriter.
And can you tell us how you got started? What is a little bit of backstory? I know we're going to get into a whole bunch of stuff, but maybe tell us how you first got started.
I started out making beats in my parents' basement. My dad had a really big record collection of a lot of soul and R&B records, and I kind of realized that a lot of them were being used on hip hop records at the time. And I was like, oh, people are just sampling these records and making new beats out of them. And I was like, I can do that. So I just started going through his collection and using computers, very rudimentary, trying to make my own beats with some of those records. And then it just kind of blossomed from there. And I did a lot of hip hop stuff and then transitioned to more pop stuff later on. But it started out with records, and I was a DJ as well.
I mean, obviously, I'm married to you, so I know tons of things about your history. But I always like to expose just a little bit behind the scenes of what it actually looks like on your journey, because, obviously you've had wild success as a producer, and there's all these accolades and awards and all these cool things that you get to experience when you've put in the hours and done all the work. But I also like to showcase sort of the turning point. I like to share that story that we talk about, in the beginning, you almost there was a point where you almost gave up because you were things were just terrible, you were broke, you were all these different opportunities were just not going your way, and then something turned a corner. So
yeah, I definitely, well, I mean, I've given up many times, but yeah, I definitely had given up. There was a time where I was DJing and the money I was making was stolen, and I basically had $0 to my name. And I was like, oh, I need to get a job. So I tried to get a job at every Guitar Center or Sam Ash, a music instrument store. And I couldn't get a job. And it just I was I have a college degree and I'm in music, and I can't even get a retail job at a Guitar Center. And then I was kind of defeated. But then a couple days later, I ended up getting a call from a rapper that I was working with, and they wanted to buy 3 songs. And it basically equaled the amount of money that I lost DJing. And it was just kind of the universe being no, you don't need to work at Guitar Center. You should keep producing because we got you, kind of thing. It was really weird. It was ironically the same amount of money that I lost. It was only $3,000 or $4,000, but I made that back within a day. But had I gotten a job at Guitar Center and started doing that, I might have given up the whole dream.
Right. So it was the universe saying, no, we actually know what is around the corner for you. And
exactly.
You're not going back to college. You're not getting accepted back to college. You're not getting accepted for a job at Guitar Center. You are producing. That is what's happening. So I always like sharing that piece of your story just because everybody out there has had to work jobs and, pay the rent and all those things and go through those really shitty times where I always like hearing the flip side of that. So do you mind sharing just a little bit about your mental health history too? Just because I know this about you, but I like sharing this piece of your history as well, just your experience.
Yeah, I definitely experienced anxiety in my early 20s and panic attacks, and I didn't really know what it was at the time. It was when I was in college and I was just having really crazy panic attacks and like it was like disassociating from my body and like a lot of like physical symptoms, racing heart and things like that. And I had to leave school for a couple months to like move back in with my mom and just like kind of like reset myself. Definitely going to therapy and getting on medication and things like that, like kind of like set me right. And like since then, I've been like pretty good. And that was probably like 15 years ago. But it was definitely like a time where I didn't really understand what was happening in my body. That just makes anxiety even worse. So it definitely took like getting some help and getting like reading about it and learning about what was happening to try to figure out like what was happening and then to try to figure out the root cause of what was happening, which was like my dad had passed away a couple of years earlier and I didn't think I had processed all that
Right.
in the moment. And it like took like a couple of years later to where it like everything that I should have processed 2 or 3 years beforehand ended up like kind of like rearing its head.
Surfacing later on.
Yeah.
Right. So what would you say is like the top 3 things that helped you the most, like dealing with anxiety? Because like you said, you didn't know what it was in the beginning
Mhm.
and then you started reading about it and all this stuff. So like, what were the 3 things that you're like, these were the 3 things that really turned the corner for me with dealing with anxiety?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of them was definitely going to therapy and just
Yeah.
having like someone tell me that I wasn't nuts and that like what I was experiencing, other people have experienced. And it kind of makes you feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. So therapy definitely helped. And then just like reading about anxiety in general and like what it is. And I think like actually learning about like what was chemically and like biologically happening in the body and in the brain and how it's all connected and how they're all talking to each other was really helpful in like kind of like taking some of the power away and the mystery out of like,
Right.
because when you're in that, it kind of feels like you're not in control of your own body and your own mind, that you've been like hijacked by like another entity or
Something else
force.
is driving. Yeah.
Right. And like, so this was kind of like, oh, now I know what's driving it and it's not crazy. And like, I can stop it if I want. And like, that was really helpful. That. And then the third thing was probably like, trying to like force myself to do like little bits of my previous routine. Cause like for a while I wasn't doing music. I wasn't watching TV. I wasn't doing anything. I was also kind of depressed too, because I was experiencing all this anxiety and it's like, well, it's never going to get any better. And this, I'm always going to feel like this. And like, so like, this sucks. And so like trying to like get back into things that I normally like to do, like just like working on music or listening to records for like 10 minutes a day, like just trying to like a glimmer of like what my previous life was, helped me kind of like start the road to recovery.
Recovery. Right. So let's talk about producer life for a second, just because we kind of didn't even get into like what daily life looks like. Like, what does daily life look like as a producer for you?
Well, there's like 2 days. I either have a session where I'm working with a bunch of people, or I have like a solo day where I'm usually finishing up songs that I've done with a bunch of people previous. So I usually have 2 or 3 sessions a week where I'm working with different songwriters, different artists. We're creating songs and they're usually kind of like half done at that point. And then I'm on my solo days, I'm taking those songs and mixing them and working on them, editing and just trying to get them to like a finished product state to then try to send around.
Right. So over the years, like obviously I've, been with you for a really long time. So I've seen you, I understand a little bit about your creative process, which we can get into a little bit more. But over the years, I've definitely seen you go through processes where you've either felt uninspired or you're like, I have too much on my plate, or, there's a flow that I've seen you in your flow and I've seen you like almost get like super dry and uninspired. And you're like, I need like a new palette of like sounds and all of that stuff just to keep your ideas fresh. So like, maybe you could speak to that, like how you stay inspired with your producer ideas.
Yeah, staying inspired. Well, I listen to a lot of things. Sometimes like maybe too analytically, but like I like to listen, like I'll listen to songs that are out, whether it's current stuff or a little bit older, just to like kind of like listen to what's happening like production wise. So not necessarily like songwriting wise and melody wise, but just more in terms of like what's going on that's around that's supporting the song, whether it's drum sounds or certain keyboard sounds or things like that. Just like, so like studying and then also like just experimenting. So like listening to a new genre and trying to see like if I can make something that like sounds like that, not to necessarily use it, but as like an exercise to keep the muscle going to like try to stretch yourself to like, it's like doing a new exercise or trying a new sport or trying a new activity. Like if you kind of stay doing the same thing all the time, you tend to get like complacent and just kind of like, oh, I know how to do that. That's fine. And like, I think keeping it new and fresh is good.
All right, let's talk about the monster. Let's talk about it. Let's just go there. Well, your big song, The Monster, with Eminem and Rihanna. Do you want to tell us about how that all came about and how it, sort of changed your life?
I had been working in New York from there, and I've been working with BB for about like a year and a half, BB Rexa, on her stuff. We've been writing a lot of songs, and we ended up, it was just a regular session day, a normal one that we would have had. And the only difference was we had John Bellion, who was a songwriter in New York at the time, and another producer that I was working with named Alias. So the four of us had a session, and we were essentially writing a song for BB. And she was working on artist music at the time. And we wrote the top line to that song, and the track itself was completely different. Same chord progression, same basic tempo, but very different sonically. And we kind of did that song. And then a couple days later we had a Christmas party at the studio that I was working at. And there was an A&R from Shady Records, which is Eminem's label that I had known for a very long time, named Riggs. And we were just having a party, and I went to the room that I was working in, and he asked me what I was working on. I told him I was working on with this artist BB, and I played him that song that we had done a couple days prior. And he was like, "This could really work for Eminem on the chorus if you like completely changed everything, minus
just like that,
minus the vocals." And so the BB version was a full song with verses and everything. And I basically just like took the hook and reproduced a brand new track around that hook, of which I did about 3 or 4 different versions of before we finally got to the final one. And I was just like, and everyone sounded very different, just because I was trying to figure out how to take her version, which was like very pop, and trying to make it a hip hop song. And also it was difficult because it's pretty fast BPM wise. It's like, I think it's 112 or 113, which is pretty fast for a hip hop song. That's full time, not double time or half time. So that was a challenge. And so I basically just did a bunch of versions until there was one that Riggs liked, and he sent it over to Eminem, and the kind of rest is history. And he ended up writing his verses. He had Rihanna re-record BB's part on the chorus, and that was it. And then, it came out and changed my life.
I remember way back when you were talking about how like they had you do like a gazillion versions, and like when you came across the last, like you had like really run yourself dry. You're like, this is the last version I'm ever doing.
Yeah,
like, I'm not
the
doing
last one I sent.
one.
The last one I sent, I told my manager that like, okay, this is the last one, and if they don't like this, then I guess it's just not going to work. It's just not going to happen because like I don't know how many more ways I can totally reproduce it. There was like 3 or 4 versions at that time, and I was like, this is the last one. Either they like any of these 3, or it just doesn't work.
Right. Almost like that universe thing where you're just kind of like, I'm like, fuck it. This is it. This is the last one. And then it ends up being the one, right?
The one. Yeah. I should have said that in the beginning when I did the first one. I should have been like, you're only getting one version.
But then it wouldn't be what it is now. So you had to go through those 3 different versions or 4 different versions or whatever. So anyway, I love sharing that story because, how cuts come about, it's different every single time. Like it's either you're working with the artist or somehow it gets passed around through the windmill and, shits out a song, and, you never really know what the origin story is. So I like sharing that piece.
Yeah.
So how would you describe your creative process overall?
It's kind of different every time. Like I would say that I'm very, kind of artist focused as a producer, meaning like I'll kind of take my cue from what the artist wants to do, as opposed to like imposing my will on them and saying this is the track or this is the sound or you should be doing this, because everyone has different tastes, and there's so many. I work with so many different genres and so many different types of artists that just kind of have one sound or one way of doing it. Things doesn't really work. So I usually kind of just have a conversation with the artist or the writer that I'm working with. And most writers are artists, even if they're not pursuing it, they still have an artist brain. And so I'll kind of just be like, what do you want to do? Because I can pretty much like do anything. I can kind of adapt and genre bend. And like, I'm not going to be I don't want to do like a house dance track if they're feeling like doing a ballad. And if they if they're feeling like doing a house dance track, I don't want to be doing a country song. So like I try to like kind of like go with what everyone's feeling in the moment, which is fun because you're kind of like just like riding the wave and everyone's kind of like deciding together like what direction you want to go in. So I usually kind of take my direction from the artist, and then my main focus in a writing session is just getting the best song possible, like best chorus, best verses, and then trying to get the best vocal possible. Doesn't always work to be able, because it's a lot to write, produce, and record in
a
like
day, right?
in a 6 or 7 hour span, especially when it's people that you've never worked with before. Like, you know, to spend an hour or two bullshitting, figuring out, and then doing everything together. So I try to get the song, because you don't know if you're going to have another day with that artist or those writers. So you kind of have like your one chance to get the vocal. So I don't do a lot of production in the day of, just to try to get the song done, so I'm not distracted, and then I can spend time doing bells and whistles and experimenting with sounds. And sometimes I end up changing like the track completely from the day of, just because like I didn't have enough time to find the right drum sounds or whatever, because I was really just trying to get the song going. So sometimes it changes.
I recall you saying that recording vocals on the day of is always your favorite, because when you come to recut it, it's like never the same. Like the magic is like gone.
It's never the same. Like, but sometimes you have to do that if you can't get a good performance or you don't have enough time. But like it usually, like the lead vocal is the most important thing, I think. And like so a lot of it can be tied to emotion, depending on what the song is. So I feel like, you know, if you have to come back to do like backgrounds or harmonies or ad-libs or whatever like that, you can kind of get away with. But I like to try to get like the main meat of it in the day.
So let's talk about how you recharge. Like, you know, part of the podcast is talking about self-care and self-care strategies. Like, do you have your favorite go-to? Like, what is like, I need this in my day for me to function, and I need XYZ for me to recharge and, you know, refill that creative well? What does that look like for you?
Like on a daily basis? I tend to listen to a lot of podcasts. I like to have like a morning, like my own alone time in the morning, listening to a podcast. Going on a walk, or maybe trying to work out, or even just like cleaning up the house, or like doing something where I'm not listening to music and I'm like thinking and doing something that's not music related, to like try to like kind of like give myself a break before like the day starts. So that's probably like my recharge, like to start the day, I think.
And flea markets, of course, and record picking.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about record picking. Let's throw it in the podcast. What is your addiction? Explain your addiction to record picking.
Well, I just love collecting records. I've been doing it for a long time. And I stopped for a while because I wasn't sampling, and I started kind of like restarted it like during the pandemic. And there's just like so much music out there that was created in the vinyl age of 60s, 70s, and 80s. And there's a lot of weird stuff. There's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of bad stuff. And it's just like the hunt for it is just like really fun. Yeah. Because there's a lot of records that are really valuable, and you can go to a flea market and get a $200 record for $1, and there's some extra money to be made there. But I mostly like just like finding things, and it's kind of like unearthing like lost artifacts, especially for like rare stuff, like a Beatles record. They made millions of them, but there's a lot of records where they didn't make a lot of them, and that was it. They made what they made 40 years ago. So it's like kind of like finding antiques kind of a little bit.
I was just going to say that, when you come to the studio, you have your whole record wall, and there's just like, I don't even know how many records you have, thousands at this point.
Yeah, there's like a little.
It's beautiful. It's amazing. I'm always like amazed every time you go record picking, and there's like, as soon as you pick something up, it's like you already know how rare it is, what it's worth, what it could go for. Yeah. And I'm just like, there's just like this Wikipedia of like information in your brain at all times. It's pretty fascinating. It's pretty cool. All right. What else should we talk about? What haven't I covered? Let's talk about how we met, because I think that's interesting.
Okay.
Do you want to tell the story?
I don't know if there was a question there. Well, you're a songwriter, and an artist, and you came to New York a couple times for songwriting sessions, and there was the first time that we met. Actually, we did a songwriting session, and we went out for drinks afterwards, which I never do with anyone I'm working with because I'm usually pretty professional. I guess you're not very professional. But yeah, we just had like a really, really great conversation that night, and that was it. It was just kind of like talking and drinks, and we did a song, and you went back to Canada, and I continued on with my life. And fast forward, we kind of stayed in touch, and then like fast forward a couple of years, you moved to New York to pursue music, and I was like really excited that you were moving, and we kind of like rekindled and hung out.
The rest is history.
The rest is history. Pretty much, you came to New York, and we hung out the first one of the first nights that you had moved, and we just kind of like clicked right from there. And you moved in a couple months later, and
facts.
We've been together ever since.
For 10 years. Been together for 10 years, married for 5. Gonna be 6 years. So I love telling this story because in the beginning, when I was still dating, I kind of swore off dudes at one point, and I kind of was like, you know what? I'm done dating. It's over. I don't care. I dated producers. I dated all kinds of people. And I was just like at the end of my rope and had given up, and then moved to New York. And I swore to myself up and down, I was like, I'm never going to date anybody else in music. Meanwhile, I end up marrying you. But so I think it's interesting because like, I always think back to like when we actually met in the studio, I could have easily canceled that session. Like, how often do you cancel sessions, right? Like you look at your calendar, like, something came up, I'm going to cancel this.
Right.
And I think about this all the time about like, what would have happened? What would my life look like if I just canceled that session, or we just never actually connected? And I'm just like, that blows my mind that like,
that is kind of crazy. If we never did it, then it would have just not happened.
I think about that all the time, about how like success is just showing up half the time, because I showed up, we worked, we had a connection beyond just the session, and then we kept working, and we still work together a lot to this day. And, and for some people it works, some people are just like, I could never work with my partner. I could never do this, but sometimes it just works. So
don't cancel sessions, because you might write a hit song, or you might meet your life partner, and you never know.
Literally. Yeah. It's true. Yeah. I was thinking about that this morning. All right. Should we do like low stakes questions? Like something silly? I don't know. Something fun. Tell me something that nobody knows about you. Or favorite movie. Favorite childhood movie.
Favorite movie is White Man Can't Jump, by far. Because I was into basketball as a kid, and it's a basketball movie, but it's also a comedy. Yeah, it's just like, and it's ironic because it takes place in LA, and I was in New York at the time, and now I ended up living here. And I just put that together just now. That's funny.
Oh, it's your life path.
It's my life path. Yeah. Maybe I was meant to be a basketball hustler on the Venice Beach basketball courts.
Maybe. I don't know.
It could still happen. It could still happen.
All right. Do you have a favorite band, favorite artist, favorite anything?
Favorite artist, probably James Brown. It's just like, he's, he also was like basically the first hip hop artist. Obviously he was sampled a lot, but he, even before that, he was basically rapping, even though he was an incredible singer. But like, his songs were kind of constructed as rap songs, like kind of like 2 or 4 bar loops with like a little change, and then right back to the same thing. Always like really drum heavy.
And then he would like bust into the splits in his dress shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. We're going to wrap this up, but I have one last question. What is one piece of advice that you tell yourself at the beginning of your career?
That I would tell myself at the beginning of my career?
Mm-hmm.
Probably just that, like, never give up. I mean, it's a terrible one, but like it's really true. And I think probably a more like eloquent way of saying is that like to persevere, and that every little step and story that you're going through is all going to like lead to something, and you may not realize it at the time. or with people you're working with, or whatever you have going on in life or whatever. And, at the time it kind of seems like insignificant, but it's somehow going to lead you to the next thing, which is going to lead you to the next thing and going to lead you to the next thing. And if you kind of quit or crap out at any point in that cycle, you kind of break the chain, and then you're off that path. Right. And it's very difficult to get back onto that path. I don't think there's a lot of people who like quit pursuing their dreams and then decide to pursue their dreams later. Like you can't kind of restart it. So like you either
stay the
you
course.
Got to go for it. Yeah, you got to stay the course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, stay the course. That's a good way to put it.
Love it. Okay. What are you working on now? How can people find you? How can people reach out to work with you?
Well, I'm on Instagram, Freak Show Music, FREQ Show Music.
Love it.
And you can just DM me there. I pretty much respond to everybody. And so that's how you can just reach out to me and like send me music. I love listening to new people and finding new talent. That's like kind of one of my like passions, aside from producing and writing music, is kind of finding things that are new. And so I'm always looking for new talent. What am I working on? Writing lots of songs. I'm also doing like some dance music, putting out some of my own records, like as a DJ, dance music, just for fun.
Just for fun.
Because I used to do it and I haven't done it in a long time. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Love it. What do you want for dinner tonight?
I took out one of the Blue Aprons or whatever.
Okay, cool. Am I cooking or are you cooking?
I'll do it.
All right.
But I have some work I have to do first.
Okay, perfect.
'Cause I know I'm ready.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. For more self-care strategies, check out my book, Self-Care for the Creative. And if you're an up-and-coming artist, songwriter, or music producer, come join us at the Songwriter Series. It's an online platform that offers one-to-one music mentorship from hit songwriters. I also curate a quarterly music industry panel to help people break into the music industry and get in the mix. For more info on all my events, visit stefanifryzel.com or just email me at info@stefanifryzel.com. If you're loving the podcast, please like, share, subscribe, share it with a friend, leave us a review. Your support is super appreciated. And don't forget, self-care is always within reach, and your greatest masterpiece will always be you.
'Cause I know I'm ready.